Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial, and happy October. It's Halloween month here in the US. So I thought I would share how I created some skeleton typography, or what I'm calling skeleton typography, in the desktop wallpaper that I gave away last week. So I want to show you how I did that, and I wanted to take it one step further with more decorative type. So this week I'm going to show you how to create this exact outcome using just 4 utensils and some cardstock. So we'll just jump right in, and I'll share all the utensils I'm using in the video description. You can get links to everything I'm using if you want to replicate the same type of thing. So the first utensil is the Sharpie paint marker, and it's got a really thick chiseled tip, which is really important for drawing your base letters. And that's important because that way you can get a lot of extra detail in there. The thicker your letters, the more detail you can squeeze in. So I really like this Sharpie paint marker. You could also use your water brush filled with black speedball ink. That also works really well. But for this example, this dries a little quicker, so that's why I wanted to use this. For all the extra really fine line detail, I'm using a Jelly Roll, just regular pen. It's a very usual tip that you'd find, typical tip. And then for the thicker details and the metallics, I'm using these paint markers. I picked these up at my supermarket. You can also get them at any craft store, department store. They're pretty easy to find. And there's also that link in the video description too. So with the gold, I actually have an ultra fine tip. And then for the white, I just have a fine tip. I kind of wish I found an extra fine tip for the white, but this works well too. So that's it. We're just using 110-pound white cardstock and then those 4 utensils, and we're just going to get started, and this is exactly what we're going to make. So I'm going to set this aside. I'll start with my Sharpie paint marker, give it a shake, and then I'm going to draw, I'm going to make these extra thick, so I'm going to do a few passes on the letters just to get the thickness right. Okay, so don't worry at all. I just noticed this. Let me clean it up. Don't worry about your letters not looking exactly the same. Like you can see here, I've got 2 O's and they definitely don't look alike. And that's perfectly fine because this entire drawing has a very handmade aesthetic. So it actually is a good thing if they don't all look the same. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about being too perfect. So just make sure that your Sharpie has dried before you move on to the next step, which this dries pretty quickly. So I think I'm already ready to go. So I'm going to grab my white painter's marker now, and I'm just going to add a little extra line detail right here. And down here. And since I'm on white cardstock, it's totally fine to go outside of the lines. Even if you're scanning it in, it won't even pick it up. So it's a nice way to add that little extra bleeds without having to plan it ahead of time. And now we're just going to go in with our Jelly Roll pen and start adding some Halloween detail. So I'm just going to do this kind of bone doodle right here in the spine of the bee. And then I'm going to add in some teardrop doodle elements just to make the bee very eye-catching to draw the reader in so they read the whole thing. And then I'll add in some decorative flourishes that kind of mimic the curve of my teardrops. Still sticking with the sugar skull type of aesthetic that I really like. Okay. So as with sugar skulls, there's usually kind of a metallic element, which is why I have the gold. So we'll just add that in to draw everything together. So I'm going to throw in a couple of dots between my bone element. And then also bring those dots into the rest of the bee. And just make sure you keep an eye on where your hand is, because if I came over here and I did the chunky part of my bee first, my hand might hit some of these paint areas, which are still drying, and you don't want to smear it or drag it on to any place you don't want it. So just keep an eye on where your hand is. Okay, so our bee is totally finished, and now we can move on to our O. So I'm going to take my thick white paint marker, and I'm going to kind of follow the contour of the counter of the O. So I'm just going to come around, and it gives it kind of a warpy feel, like a vortex, and I really kind of dig that. So let's go with that. And then we're going to introduce a really common sugar skull element, which is that half circle. So I'm going to draw those in right here and right here. And we're going to convert these into being spider webs. So we're going to do these warpy spider webs that kind of follow that same contour around once again. And then the same thing up here. And then I'm going to draw a border all the way around just to kind of finish it off. And then I'm going to reintroduce these half circles down at the bottom and up at the top. This O can be really tricky with where your hand is, so definitely just make sure you're watching where your palm is hitting. And it's okay to stack your half circles because you don't want to get them too gigantic. You want to keep things pretty uniform. So don't feel bad about stacking them. It also adds a nice layer of dimension. So it's kind of nice. Okay, so the last thing we have to do with this O is bring in our metallic. So I'm just gonna throw in some gold dots in my half circles, here and here, and then also in that border that I drew. And then the same thing here. And then in all of these half circles. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing I just did here on this O, and then we'll finish it off with the exclamation point. So I'll speed it along so you can see it one more time. Okay, so once again, don't worry about if they don't look totally alike. That's perfectly fine. We're going for that hand-drawn feel. So we're going to finish everything off with a spider web element in our exclamation point. And we're going to do that by having two large half circles, integrating those tinier half circles in it, and then throwing a spider web down here. So I'm going to start with my jelly roll. I'm not going to use the thicker white one on this since it's a smaller element. So I'm opting to just use my jelly roll here for the white line work. And then I'm going to bring in those smaller half circles here. And then to create that kind of fake spider web, I need all of my lines to kind of head towards one invisible point. So that invisible point is going to come off the center area. So if I draw a straight line off of my more center points here, and it's going to be over here, so these lines are going to kind of head in that direction. Same thing over here, my point would be over here, so these are going to head in that direction. Okay. And then I'm going to draw my spider web down here. So I'm just going to draw a point in the middle just to work off of, and then just draw random diagonal lines. It doesn't matter where they hit. Just have them come off of that center point. And then for spider webs, I just do this curved line around. And then I do another one on the outside that kind of bleeds off. So it gives the viewer the impression that there's more and that it keeps going. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is just bring in our gold element. So I'm just going to do these decorative lines off the top and the bottom of my exclamation point, just to add that extra excitement. Do my dots and the half circles once again, just to be consistent. And then I'm going to draw a little spider right in the middle of the web, so I'm going to cover up that centered dot point and then just give them a few little legs. All right, so that's how to create skeleton typography or skeleton lettering using just 4 utensils and a sheet of cardstock. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design tutorial every single Tuesday, and don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design tutorials and a bunch of design freebies. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.